a Tsar trapped in Moldavia and a refugee king screaming for blood inside a silk tent open this chapter of the Great Northern War. This confrontation marks the Pruth River Campaign 1711 and the decisive Charles XII confrontation with Baltachi Mehmet Pasha at the Pruth. An exiled king without an army manages to manipulate two empires into war, trapping Tsar Peter I before diplomatic compromise and gold buy out his victory inside a silk tent. Yet the trap snaps shut too late. 2 years earlier, the disastrous Battle of Poltava shatters Swedish military supremacy across northern Europe. Incapacitated by an agonizing gunshot wound, King Charles XII escapes across the river into Ottoman sanctuary. Tsar Peter I now expands his imperial footprint south, threatening both Swedish survival and Turkish borders. From his refugee enclave at Karstad near Bender, the Swedish monarch rejects defeat. He establishes a clandestine spy network, sending dispatches wrapped in silk to Istanbul to ignite an empire-level conflict. General Stanisław Poniatowski rides into Constantinople under cover of night to coordinate the king's lobbying effort. Charles XII firmly believes that provoking a southern war between rival empires is the sole mechanism to rescue Sweden. A French ambassador's dispatch preserves one concrete detail: 12 wagons of silver changed hands to secure court allies in Istanbul. Poniatowski allies with the Crimean Khan, exposing pro-peace officials as traitors. Secret political pressure forces Sultan Ahmed III to replace his cautious Grand Vizier. The Green Imperial War Standard rises above Topkapi Palace as Sultan Ahmed III formally declares war on Russia. Ottoman couriers ride toward every province, assembling a staggering host of 200,000 Ottoman troops and Crimean Tatars. Grand Vizier Baltachi Mehmet Pasha assumes supreme command, balancing military strategy with court politics. Tsar Peter I marches south with 38,000 infantry, heavily outnumbered 5-1. The Russian monarch remains confident his modernized army will crush the Turks and capture Charles. Tsar Peter I expects Balkan Orthodox populations to rise in general rebellion upon his arrival, but local princes hesitate and withhold supplies. Across the border, Charles XII commands ferocious willpower even while crippled by his infected foot and carried on an improvised litter. The Russian monarch marches 38,000 troops deep into Moldavian territory, entirely blind to the logistical disaster unfolding ahead. Swarms of locusts devour crops while wells dry under scorching heat, leaving the invading Russian army completely isolated. Tsar Peter orders his vanguard past the Pruth River, committing his army to the sun-baked interior. This bold advance transforms the southern flank of the Great Northern War into a deadly trap. Russian cavalry detachments scatter to find food, while Grand Vizier Baltachi Mehmet Pasha advances northward with 200,000 men. Outnumbered 5-1, 38,000 Russians march directly toward 200,000 Ottoman soldiers. Neither monarch can turn back without surrendering his empire. Foam-flecked horse legs of Crimean Tatar cavalry pound through sun-baked Moldavian dust surrounding the exhausted Russian columns. Temperatures soar past 100 degrees, while the deafening roar of 400 Ottoman siege guns echoes across the muddy floodplains. Inside overturned supply wagons, starving Russian infantry choke on acrid gun smoke as swarming Tatar arrows rain from nearby ridges. The surrounding Ottoman ring locks tight around 38,000 trapped soldiers near Stanilecht. All retreat avenues across the river are cut off. Ottoman engineers dig continuous siege trenches around the trapped Russian perimeter, advancing 40 heavy artillery batteries to point-blank range. An eyewitness letter describes Russian soldiers picking off bloated horse carcasses for meat, while snipers cover the muddy riverbank. Tsar Peter I faces total military destruction as ammunition reserves vanish after repelling fierce Janissary bayonet charges. With water supplies severed and casualties mounting, the Russian command structure breaks down under relentless physical pressure. Surrender or total slaughter remains the only choice. A desperate Russian envoy carrying imperial gold and sweeping land concessions crosses enemy lines under a white flag to halt the Ottoman bombardment. Tsar Peter I authorizes Vice-Chancellor Peter Shafirov to yield vital Black Sea strongholds to preserve the army. This sudden peace offer threatens to destroy Charles XII's master plan before he can even reach the battlefield. If the Grand Vizier accepts the terms, Tsar Peter will march away intact, breaking the Swedish trap completely. Grand Vizier Baltachi Mehmet Pasha signs the Treaty of the Pruth, halting the assault in exchange for territorial concessions and Russian withdrawal. This sudden decision alters the course of the Pruth River Campaign 1711, leaving Crimean Tatars and Swedish observers stunned. Rather than risking a bloody assault against desperate infantry, the Vizier prioritizes an immediate diplomatic triumph. Hearing rumors of the signed pact, King Charles XII leaps onto his horse, beginning a frantic 80-mile ride across the sun-baked steppe. Swapping exhausted mounts at every relay station, Charles XII rides through the night, despite his infected, agonizing foot wound. The Swedish king pushes his battered body past physical limits, driving his horse recklessly across the steppe to reach the Ottoman encampment. Finding the Pruth River swollen by swift currents, he forces his mount directly into the raging waters rather than waiting for a ferry. Mud-caked and desperate, he charges toward the Grand Vizier's imperial pavilion to void the signed treaty. King Charles XII, mud-caked and wearing spur-torn boots, bursts through heavy silk tent curtains into Grand Vizier Baltachi Mehmet Pasha's council room. The scent of sweet rosewater incense clashes with cold river silt, while gold-threaded carpets lie beneath the monarch's filthy riding boots. Charles demands 20,000 janissaries to storm the trapped Russian camp immediately. Baltachi Mehmet Pasha remains impassive, pointing out that the Sultan already secured his peace terms, leaving the exiled monarch powerless inside the imperial tent. A sharp metallic rip echoes through the pavilion as Charles hooks his iron spur into the Grand Vizier's silk robe, tearing the fabric in rage. The Swedish king accuses the Ottoman commander of selling away a historically decisive victory for Russian gold. Baltachi Mehmet Pasha calmly asks who would rule Russia if Tsar Peter were captured, reminding Charles that he is merely an uninvited guest. Furious and humiliated, Charles turns on his heel and rides back toward his enclave at Bender. Russian regiments raise their battle standards and march out of the muddy floodplain, with drumbeats echoing along the riverbank. Tsar Peter I escapes military annihilation, preserving his officer corps and field army to fight another day in the Great Northern War. Although Russia surrenders the fortress of Azov and raises Black Sea outposts, its core war machine remains completely intact. Charles XII watches his strategic trap dissolve into parchment, while his main rival marches north untouched. Dismissal and disgraced exiles swiftly overtake the Ottoman leadership, following the controversial signing at the river. Charles XII sends frantic dispatches to Constantinople, accusing the Grand Vizier of taking bribes. Ottoman court records confirm political dispatches from Bender forced the Sultan to strip Baltachi Mehmet Pasha of office. While court rivals condemned the Vizier for taking gold, modern historians still debate the truth. Was it simple corruption or a brilliant diplomatic move to end a costly war? Yet the ratified treaty stands firm. Refusing to accept defeat, Charles XII transforms his sanctuary at Karlstadt into an entrenched military camp. The Swedish king ignores repeated imperial firmans from Sultan Ahmed III, ordering him to vacate Ottoman territory immediately. His stubborn insistence on launching another southern campaign turns the royal refugee into an unwanted squatter on Turkish soil. Tensions boil between the Swedish retinue and local Ottoman janissaries, setting the stage for an explosive armed clash that would shatter the monarch's sanctuary. European courts assumed Tsar Peter I was finished, yet news of his escape at the riverbank sends shockwaves through foreign chancelleries. Free from southern threats, Peter redirects his full military might back toward the Baltic coast, accelerating the construction of St. Petersburg. Sweden bleeds under crushing taxes and conscription, while its refugee monarch remains stranded in Moldavia. The failure of the Pruth River Campaign 1711 seals the fate of the Swedish Empire, guaranteeing Russia's permanent rise as a northern superpower. How did Tsar Peter I escape complete destruction during the Pruth River Campaign 1711 when encircled by 200,000 Ottoman troops? Was it the sudden exchange of imperial gold and sweeping diplomatic concessions inside a silk tent? Or did traditional Ottoman statecraft prioritize border stability over the total annihilation of a trapped foreign army? The answer reshaped European geopolitics forever, proving that secret diplomacy inside a tent can dismantle the ultimate military trap. The dramatic fallout of the Pruth River Campaign 1711 permanently broke Sweden's offensive power in the Great Northern War. Trapped in a web of his own creation, King Charles XII refused to leave Moldavia, hunkering down at Karlstad, while relations with his Ottoman hosts dissolved into open hostility. In the months following the treaty, Charles remained under house arrest after his wooden complex was reduced to ashes. The next collision would come at the Kalabalik of Bender, where his former allies turned their cannons on his house. When an exiled king stands alone against 10,000 soldiers inside a burning compound, history turns into an explosive siege. Our upcoming feature covers the insane spectacle of the Kalabalik of Bender. Subscribe now so you never miss this next chapter in early modern political history. If watching on TV, scan the QR code to join us.